He called her his muse, but treated her like a test subject. She screamed in pain while he watched in silence and took pleasure in it. Imagine this. In full view of the crew, he made her do the unthinkable. Their home became a stage for games too disturbing to say aloud. And in the press, people whispered that they had completely lost their minds. Why did Isabella faint from visions? What was the white dog that shadowed their every step? And how did she once wake up beside David, only to see his spirit in the mirror? Their romance was a scandal steeped in suffering, mysticism, and perversion. You simply must stay through to the end, because only there does the truth appear. The truth that destroyed their love. David Lynch and Isabella Rossellini. Their names became, in the late 20th century, synonymous with enigma and controversy. Some thought their romance was an elaborate hoax, others one of the most gripping love stories of the modern era. What truly happened between them was known only to the two of them, and they kept their silence. That silence continued even after they split. But at last, the secrets have been revealed. Their story has been pieced together bit by bit. From stray confessions, slips of the tongue, odd gestures, and hints. Director David Lynch and actress Isabella Rossellini seemed to invent a game that shattered familiar ideas about romance. Their interests only underlined how unusual a pair they were. Isabella read cards to peer into the future, while Lynch plunged into spiritualism, psychoanalysis, and the esoteric teachings of Native Americans. One obsession haunted him in particular: the desire to pass through realms where time loses its power. Later, this would surface in his cult series Twin Peaks, with the concept of the mysterious black and white lodges, places that exist outside ordinary reality. Their first meeting happened by chance, at a shared table in a New York restaurant. What caught Lynch's eye was not Isabella herself, but her bright red dress, as if it were alive in its own right. For Lynch, a master of symbols, color always carried special meaning. Without preamble, he said, "Red is drugs," and let the words hang in the air. And that was only the beginning of the strangeness. Instead of explaining, he drifted into his own philosophy. Lynch believed in the power of dreams and insisted that each of us is far more complicated than we seem at first glance. All you need is the right angle, the one at which everyday actions shed their mundane simplicity and gain symbolic depth. He added that he sensed in Isabella a certain corruption, which she herself always chalked up to innocent curiosity. The conversation stretched on, and soon they discovered how much they had in common. Lynch was drawn to fatalism. What he claimed was the legacy of a great-great-grandmother with Mayan blood, which gave his faith a mystical tint. His strange, almost feverish talk pulled Isabella in. He clearly did not know how to flirt in any ordinary sense. Guessing at his tastes, Isabella ventured, "You probably like horoscopes." "You guessed right," he replied curtly. When they left the restaurant, a huge white dog crossed their path. It walked straight up to Lynch, rubbed against his legs, and calmly went on its way. A startled Isabella asked, "Is that your dog? Do you know it?" "No," Lynch said. "That is our fate." She wanted to answer with a joke pitched to the same philosophical key, but realized he was speaking mostly to himself, scarcely aware of her. What lay behind this cryptic encounter? Later, recalling her first impression of David, Isabella called him a good boy with the makings of a maniac, a combination that fit his films perfectly. Lynch, for his part, was especially struck by her mouth. What a combination! those hard white teeth and such soft, tender lips. She had seen such a contradiction and covert sensuality only in the Marquis de Sade. He even noticed the tiny chip on her front tooth, the trace of a childhood fight with her brother. That flaw only intensified his strange attraction. Lynch himself gave their meeting little weight, but a week later his eye fell on the magazine Screen World with a photo of his new acquaintance from a Taviani Brothers film. He learned she was the daughter of the great director Roberto Rossellini and the actress Ingrid Bergman. That same day, recognizing her heritage and talent, he brought her the script of his new film, Blue Velvet. Isabella immediately liked the role of Dorothy, a nightclub singer with sadomasochistic inclinations. Playing her felt strangely close and clear. The heroine's depression, a sense of causeless fear. She knew all of that firsthand. On set, to achieve maximum intensity, Lynch told her to attack Kyle MacLachlan, a chance lover of her characters, and the future Agent Cooper in Twin Peaks, with a knife, and scream. His direction was simple. You subconsciously hate men. Take out your rage on Kyle, just because he is a man. Later, Isabella admitted that she drew on her own experience to play Dorothy. Once, a man had beaten her brutally. She did not remember all the details, only that she came to on a sidewalk in the night, alone. And the strongest feeling she had was a strange sense of guilt, as if what had happened were somehow her fault. Her terrible past became a key to Lynch's success. It is curious that when he offered her the role, Lynch did not know about that tragic episode. She told him later, once they had grown close. David's response was startlingly shrewd. I guessed it from your lips. In return, he shared a story from his first marriage. From his former wife, he had a daughter, Jennifer, who had been born with legs that did not work properly. He drew a parallel with Eraserhead, where the hero becomes the father of a baby without arms or legs. Lynch denied any direct connection, insisting that from childhood, he had learned a simple rule. If you want to astonish people, say aloud what you say to yourself in your sleep. All my films are me and my fate. They are very personal, he said. Critics often reproached his films for their darkness, for an atmosphere of pervasive dread. And after that first meeting, Isabella confessed to a friend, Lynch is a horror show, but I like him. In that simple phrase was a deep understanding of his strange nature. Perhaps Isabella sensed that if her life had unfolded differently, she, like David, might have created terrible art from her own experience, turning pain into creativity. The one thing she could not understand were his sudden silences, when he seemed to switch off mid-conversation and retreat into his inner world. During the shooting of Blue Velvet, she even asked the studio secretary whether this happened with anyone else. The woman grew flustered and dodged the question. One day, Isabella decided to keep silent for a full hour. Lynch sat opposite, listening to her silence with undimmed attention, but his gaze betrayed that he was wandering somewhere inside himself. For the first time, she even found it romantic. One more riddle layered onto their relationship. They grew close on set, where the line between reality and invention kept blurring. Isabella had no idea what she was in for. In one scene, her partner Dennis Hopper, following Lynch's instructions, caused her real pain. When she tried to scream, he stuffed a strip of blue velvet into her mouth, cut straight from the hem of her robe. Lynch sat in his chair, hands over his face, peeking through his fingers like a boy spying on someone else's game over a fence, with a cool, almost clinical interest. For Isabella, it was deeply unpleasant. From the pain, she let out a primal scream. "That is it, baby!" growled a satisfied Dennis Hopper, one of American cinema's most famous maniacs. It turned out Lynch had added this brutal episode to the script without warning, striving for maximum psychological effect. It was not merely play, it was refined cruelty. But to what end? The symbolism of Blue Velvet remained a mystery for Isabella. When she asked David about it, he said he did not know himself what the blue meant, and added, "It is better if nobody knows," hinting at something deeper and more troubling. One day on set, Lynch gave her a toy, a fluffy white puppy. "Feed her," he said. "Remember the dog we met when we left the restaurant?" The puppy became the talisman of their strange romance. In its eyes, Isabella always saw a living expression, as if a piece of that fateful dog had taken up residence in it. After the shoot, alone together, they continued their odd game, telling each other their darkest, most intimate secrets. It felt like psychotherapy, where the border between the personal and art disappeared. Isabella carelessly shared this with a friend, and he was the first to spread the rumor that Lynch and Rossellini were crazy, surrounding them with an aura of madness and eccentricity. Often after heavy confessions, Lynch would go off to meditate, diving into his inner cosmos, while Isabella sat beside him and watched in silence. Reading her thoughts, he would say, "I do anything I want with you," in my head. Soon that phrase, spoken in private, leaked into the press, feeding the legend of their strange bond. His words shocked the world. What exactly was he doing to Isabella? Every morning, David began with the same question: "Why am I alive?" And every time Isabella answered, "To frighten people." It was the perfect line for an artist whose work sought to shock and stir fierce emotion. Lynch opened for Isabella a world of strange, almost otherworldly beauty. He had a mystical sense of aesthetics that ran counter to accepted canons. On her first birthday, they celebrated together. He gave her an incredibly expensive antique vase. Isabella rejoiced, marveling at its perfection. David came over, took a hammer, and with one decisive blow chipped off a piece of the rim. "Now it is more beautiful," he said, embodying his philosophy. Damage and flaw lend objects a special depth. His notions of beauty were unusual. He found it in the most unexpected things, in a cracked glass, in an oil stain on asphalt, in human skin. Could anything be more beautiful? He would ask Isabella. Only smoke rising into the sky or the lines of telegraph wires could compete. Contrasts fascinated him. Oil and cement, a factory by the sea. The sea itself, untouched by man, seemed dull to him. Only traces of human interference made nature beautiful. "Imagine, say, an oil refinery in the middle of a desert," he would say, finding in it a harsh elegance. "And if one looks at Isabella Rossellini, is it not obvious that your ideal of female beauty is rather traditional?" someone once asked him. Lynch answered in his signature enigmatic manner. "Each of us sees beauty in the contrast of things. I am no exception." He admitted that he was susceptible to classical standards himself, but he refracted them through his own unique perception. Lynch and Isabella never officially married. Their relationship sidestepped formalities. They simply lived together as lovers and kept house as spouses. Isabella thought it would always be that way. Lynch did not. "It is too much like your family," he grumbled, alluding to the resemblance to her parents, a great director and a famous actress. Her mother and father's romance spawned many legends, but Roberto Rossellini never spoke publicly of his happiness. David, by contrast, put their romance on display. Isabella probably would have liked to marry him. She thought about it often. But something that had come into their home along with Lynch's meditations kept her from deciding. Something dark took up residence in their house. In the first 6 months of their relationship, when her influence over him was especially strong, his ideas grew darker than usual, perhaps reflecting inner conflicts and change. During the filming of Blue Velvet, Isabella began to have nightmares in which Lynch fled the house and vanished, leaving her alone. One night she woke and, horrified, saw that David was not beside her. She screamed and suddenly saw his reflection in the mirror, as if his spirit had stepped out of his body. The shock made her faint. In the morning, David lay next to her, sleeping peacefully, as if nothing had happened. Isabella told him the dream. He only shrugged and, out of politeness, asked, "Did I say anything to you?" "No," she answered. "Your lips moved without sound." "I understand," Lynch said shortly. "What do you understand?" Isabella laughed, but he offered no explanation. It was not just a dream, it was a sinister omen. There was not a single newspaper in America that did not write about this strange couple. Every gesture and every word of Lynch's was mined for hidden meaning. Their relationship was read as performance art. At times, Isabella felt she was going mad under the press's pressure. Work on Blue Velvet ended. The film brought both her and the picture itself enormous success. With the end of the shoot, the nightmares vanished as if she had escaped a suffocating atmosphere. The white toy dog David had given her now simply gathered dust on her dressing table, its mystic power gone. Now Isabella could honestly say that, as an actress, she had nearly matched her mother's success in the films of the great Rossellini. In her book Some of Me, she wrote that today's people in their 30s hardly remember Ingrid Bergman and know Isabella Rossellini not as the daughter of a cinema legend, whom they also know almost nothing about, but as David Lynch's actress, which only underscored his colossal influence on her career. Unexpectedly, Lynch declared that they needed to communicate with voices. "Do you hear voices?" he pressed. "I do not mean illness, I mean premonitions." Isabella admitted that once, after her mother's death, she had indeed heard her mother's voice. At the time, she was working as a television journalist and interviewing Clint Eastwood. She expected him to discourse on violence in cinema and had prepared a complicated question. But Eastwood replied briefly that there was no violence in his films and fell silent. Isabella was thrown off, and at that moment her mother's mocking voice sounded beside her. "Always think through the possible answers to your question." It became an important lesson for her. David had dozens of similar stories, only far more frightening, bound up with terror and the occult. If he did not love women so much, he would surely have become a pagan sorcerer, Isabella once said. And it was a precise definition of his tie to mysticism and his allure for women. She kept moving the fluffy dog from place to place, as if training it. "I am teaching her not to run away," she explained to David, perhaps unconsciously hinting at her fear of losing him. More and more often she spoke of a child, of a family. Lynch objected sharply. He was afraid to have children again, after his first daughter had been born with a physical defect that he associated with psychedelic experiments. That story frightened Isabella as well. To distract her, he promised to buy a dress with a silicone belly so that people would think she was pregnant. "What if I wear it not for 9 months, but for a year?" she asked, testing his seriousness. Lynch merely shrugged. Meanwhile, their strange games of candor had run their course. Lynch grew bored. his energy sought new fuel. The papers insisted that a new Juliet lived with a Romeo whose fantasies were less than healthy, and they emphasized the madness of it all. Tired of the noise and eccentricity, Isabella longed for change. She seriously considered writing memoirs that would help her make sense of this unique experience. One day, returning from the store, she again saw a white dog in the yard, the very one that had once crossed their path. She took it as a bad omen. The dog looked at her, turned away, and ran. Isabella lost consciousness. The journalists, of course, did not miss a chance to blow up a sensation, mythologizing their story even further. A couple of days later, she discovered with horror that her own white toy dog, David's gift, had vanished. She ran to him with questions, but he muttered irritably that she should leave him alone and ignored her alarm. The next day at the studio, Isabella happened to overhear two cleaning women talking. "You will never get that out," one complained. "Mr. Lynch feeds her anywhere, and there are greasy food stains everywhere." "Wait, Mr. Lynch has a dog?" Isabella felt a clench inside. "Yes, everyone knows. He has a big white dog, always with him. But nobody has seen her for 5 days. Did you not know, madam?" Isabella said nothing. Shaken, she hurried out. Back home, while David was away, she quickly packed, called a cab, and left. Forever. As the car pulled away, she looked back and thought she saw David on the threshold. He had covered his face with his hands and was looking at her through his fingers, as if he were shooting one more scene from his own film. Thus ended their enigmatic romance, leaving behind only questions and a legend.